In this episode of Tasting Anarchy, we're joined by Pepper at Wine and Liberty on Twitter. Pepper is an active libertarian, and we discuss wine and the wine industry in and around Indiana. Enjoy the show.
And that's that.
When you're starting out, it's hard to tell high-quality wine from a bottle of plunk. It can also get really expensive. Boy, have I found that out lately by looking at my bank statements. I did a lot of research to find a better way to buy quality wine without breaking the bank, and that's how I discovered an awesome website called Last Bottle Wines. Last Bottle Wines has fostered personal relationships with wineries across the world and offer one bottle of high-quality wine a day at 30 to 70% off. When the bottle is gone, it's gone. New day, new bottle, new savings. I recently ordered a Spanish Tempranillo. This wine normally retails for $74, and I got it from Last Bottle Wines for only $32. It's not a wine club, so there's no fees. Shipping is affordable and can even be free. You know Mason and I are always after the best wines at the best price. We want you to enjoy the same deal. That's why we got you this special offer. Some of our listeners have already taken advantage of the deal and are loving the experience. All you need to do is go to lastbottlewines.com/invite/tastinganarchy to get $10 off your first purchase while helping your favorite Wine and Liberty podcast. That's lastbottlewines.com/invite/tastinganarchy to get $10 off a delicious bottle of wine at 30 to 70% off.
Down in Petersburg, everything's fine. All them cats is drinking that wine. Drinking that mess is their delight. When you get drunk, start singing all night. Drinking wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me.
Welcome to Tasting Anarchy. This is your host, Jacob Lindsay, and as always, I'm joined by the co-host,
Mason Joseph.
This week we have a very special guest from Indiana, which has got a lot of, I don't know if this is surprising to most of our listeners or not, maybe as surprising as it is that there's a wine coming out of Texas, but Indiana actually has a growing and thriving wine market, and our guest, Pepper, hails from Indiana, and she's going to join us in on the conversation of, I guess, what's going on in the Great Lakes region, and well, actually, it'll kind of go over a lot of the United States that is not well known for wine, because one of the topics I kind of wanted to get into with you guys was hybrid grapes. And I did a little bit of research. One of the grape varietals that Pepper you shared with me that you really like is I'm gonna butcher this, so I should apologize for this in advance. But you told me that you like Aglianico. Can you say it, Pepper?
Aglianico.
Okay, Aglianico, and then the other one?
Traminette.
That sounds right. I was gonna say like Traminette or something.
Yeah.
But
it's actually the Indiana state wine.
Yeah, I read that on there.
It's made by grapes that were, created at Purdue University in Lafayette, Indiana, and so they're our own grapes grown in our own soil, and it's a pretty good wine. It's white wine. It's off dry. It's a pretty good wine.
Yeah, well, I was reading about it, and that it is a hybrid with a French-American hybrid, which they said was like undeterminate. And Mason, one that you like is Gewürztraminer, the German white, and a lot of people describe it as tasting very much like that. Now,
yes, there's a winery here in Indiana, Tui's Winery, that actually sells that, and we just call it Groovy because no one can pronounce it properly, and so they just started advertising it as Groovy wine, and then when you go in there, you order Groovy wine.
Okay, Groovy wine.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, after you mentioned to me the two E's on Twitter, I went on into their website. And actually, Mason, you know how you and I always complain about how most wineries have terrible websites?
Yes.
This winery actually has a really good website.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's very clear. It advertises the services that they have. Mason, you may find this interesting. They make wines out of Concord grapes.
Oh.
Yeah, I've never had that. That's really interesting to me.
I have not either.
So
we actually have their most popular wine is Plunk, and it's a very sweet wine, and it is made out of Concord grapes, and it's a huge hit with, I think people now can order the Plonk wine from Tuies and have it shipped to people in Indiana. They can't ship it out of the state, but you can order it if you live in Indiana and have it shipped to you. So that's a new thing, and that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's one of the things that we're probably going to get into in the show today is about the shipping laws for direct wine sales, because a lot of that legislation, well, not legislation, but the lawsuits are coming out of Indiana. But first, I kind of wanted to just kind of go over who you are, Pepper, because I sort of derailed that and botched the introduction. It just got right into talking about wine. But, you were introduced to me by a mutual friend online, and you're part of the Big L Libertarian. You're Wine and Liberty on Twitter, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so like I said, you're from the Great Lakes region. What else would you like to tell us about yourself? Because I'm just kind of curious, like, how did you get involved in the Liberty movement, and how did you become Wine and Liberty? How did you make that association?
Well, I got involved in the Liberty movement mostly when Ron Paul ran for president back when Bush was nominated. I thought it was pretty crazy at the time. And some of the things he said I thought were just way out there. And so I started looking into some of the things he was saying, especially about foreign policy and Iran and how we got involved in that whole mess over there. And he turned out to be, in my view, correct. And so I kind of went off into this whole where I just couldn't identify with the Republicans anymore. I spoke for the Libertarian Party in 2015 in Indiana, the Indiana Libertarian Party. I was a guest speaker for how to get women involved in the Liberty movement because women tend to shy away from libertarianism. And then in 2018, no, it was 16. I actually ran for office and I did lose. I ran against a Jim Bank, 3rd District, Indiana. And he is the Republican. I ran against a Democrat who endorsed Trump, and he was homeless, and he lived in a hotel room, and he collected Social Security, and he had some pretty interesting interviews of him drinking beer and reading the Bible with porn playing in the background. And so the Libertarian Party approached me thinking it might be a good shot at least beating the Democrat and being that in that top tier, or, the two-party thing. And due to straight party voting, that just didn't happen. This individual that was nominated for the Democrat Party was actually shared a name of a prominent Democrat in the area, so people thought they were voting for him. And so I lost. I did get 20,000 votes in the 3rd District, which is a record.
That's pretty high. Yeah.
I don't know that I'm going to run for office again, but I'm married. I've been married for 2.5 decades. We have 7 children. My husband had 3 daughters. He had custody of them when we got married. And then we went on to have 4 children together. We have 1 boy out of the whole bunch. We have 3 Great Danes and a Samoyed. We're pretty busy. We both work. We raise kids. We raise dogs, and we have chickens. And I love wine. My area has a winery. We used to live 5 minutes from it, and we bought a house about 30 minutes from it. So that was kind of sad, but we pretty excited about our winery out here. It's a fascinating winery. It's really neat looking. It's neat to go there. They have lots of concerts there and lots of events going on that you can go over there and buy wine. But I like wine. I like liberty. I don't know that there's a chance that libertarians can win in this atmosphere with what's going on. Everyone is so polarized, and so I hate to say this, but I've kind of just thrown up my hands in politics because I see the country is just spiraling out of control almost. So, but that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow, that sounds good. And just real quick for the listeners, because not all states have this. The straight party voting is where you're allowed to just mark Democrat or Republican at the top of the ticket, and it'll just vote for all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't even have to know the names of the people you were voting for. You just go in there and Republican, leave the building, Democrat, leave the building, and that's it.
That's so strange.
That sounds as insane to me as the recent thing where most of the heavy blue-leaning states are trying to change it so that their what's it called? Electoral college votes go immediately to the national winner. Doesn't matter what happens in their state. So it's like
to the popular vote.
Trump's coming for your democracy.
Yeah. Well, I actually talked to people who later on after the election, I talked to them and they learned some of my views and I told them I ran and they said, well, I voted for Democrats because of Trump. And I'm like, well, you voted for this guy right here. And they were flabbergasted that they voted for this guy who is not anyone that they would have normally voted for. But yeah, in my view, I hate straight party voting. I think it's part of what's wrong with this country.
Well, it's very corrupt. It seems very corrupt.
Yeah.
And very, we used to have something similar. Mason and I were involved with libertarians in Virginia Beach. I think me a little bit more than you, Mason, but, but they had, something very similar where they were where they had, it wasn't straight party voting, but they wouldn't break. So like basically you would run in, let's say like Mason, this will make more sense for you, but like you ran in the Beach District or whatever. Mm-hmm. But not only Beach District people are voting for that person. You can you can vote all like in wide areas. So one of the things that the Libertarian Party there was involved in trying to do is to get borough voting instead, so that you in your district would be voting for your city rep instead of it just being the entire city voting for the rep for your area, which is like that. It didn't make any sense. There was a lot of weird stuff like that going on. I think they actually tried to do straight party voting in Virginia at one point, and it was defeated.
I think it's been defeated every time it's been tried. I don't know if it's been. I don't think it's ever passed and then been like struck down.
Right.
But yeah, so. Just so people are aware, in Virginia, it's one of the few states in the country that has independent cities. So like Virginia Beach there's no county. And where I live in Norfolk, there's no county. So in Virginia Beach, there was always this weird thing where like I never really thought about it until after somebody brought it up at the meetings, is like in Virginia Beach like has its own ways of subdividing the city. And one of the things is they'll say boroughs, but then like you only really learn about that in like third grade and then like randomly during voting time. Cause like then they'll, talk about neighborhoods and stuff like that. Virginia Beach is the area wise, not the largest city in Virginia, but population is the largest city in Virginia. So like it's 400,000 people and you could be voting like very close to like this small little section of the city that's way different than like the north end of the beachfront or something like that. And yet you get to vote for who directly represents them for some reason. And it's like a complete, like, I mean, Jacob, this makes more sense to you, but like, Chesapeake or Kempsville is way different than the North Shore of Virginia Beach, which is like, North Shore is like in our area, like in Virginia Beach, there are $1 million homes, but it's very rare. So it's like $600,000 homes, which is an area that the median home price is probably like $300,000. And one is like literally the North Shore of the Atlantic Ocean, and the other is like swampy.
Well, and that's one of the things that I used to live down near Kempsville, or I live in Strawbridge or whatever. But I think that Pepper kind of empathizes with this in general because it's just one of the difficult things for libertarians is that in general is that the way that the structures are set up is it makes it very, very difficult to enter. It makes it really difficult to beat incumbents, and then the additional layer on that is difficult to defeat a Democrat or a Republican. So you've got like it's like multiple tiers of added difficulty. So
especially now when everyone's so polarized, that you've got this mindset that you've got to keep Democrats out, so I have to vote Republican.
Yeah.
You've got to keep Republicans out, so I've got to vote Democrat. So there's no in between ground. There's no looking at issues. There's no looking at individuals. It's just this party mentality, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Mason.
Like Jacob, I was going to say, this is the classic thing that I've talked about for years now. I've talked about on the show several times is, so both Jacob and I, are young enough to basically, our first real president was Clinton, but like the first president when you're kind of having these real big ideas, George W. or, the W. So,
right.
Like that was like his and Al Gore's election is the last time I remember planks being an important thing and not just the Republican ticket. And you're like, wait a minute.
And it's so crazy. The issues are so, I guess it's either, this way or the highway. There's no common ground between parties anymore. There's no common ground even within the Republican Party or within the Democrat. You're either this extreme mentality or this extreme mentality, or you're left behind, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what, Mason and I came to this realization a while ago, especially since we kind of went down the anarchist, like Murray Rothbard, Mary Ruwart path, is what is a different way other than politics that we can try to reach people. And that's one of the reasons why we started this wine show is that there's a lot of people who are interested in wine, and they often don't realize how involved the government is with their wine, and how difficult it can be for you to get the wine that you want. Or, a really good example of this is recently I sent Mason some wine from I don't know what the correct legalese is for this, but I tried to send...
You sent me some fancy kombucha.
Yeah, there we go. I sent Mason some fancy kombucha in the mail, and the reason I sent kombucha instead of wine is because you can't ship wine from Texas to Virginia without all sorts of special licenses, and it's multiple things. It's the federal law, but it's also state laws in a lot of places that prevent that. And I think this is one of the reasons why probably like wine regions such as Indiana is a good example, are not more popular than they are. And I know that like Michigan's starting to grow and starting to like catch people's attention and stuff like that. But like when I was doing research for this show, Indiana's got a lot of stuff going on. And let me go through a couple of these that they said these are the hybrid grapes that Indiana does really well. And I'll read them off real quick, and you can tell me, Pepper, if you've heard of them before. The first one, I know you've heard of this one because we just talked about it. It was the Traminette. Am I saying that correct? Traminette?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Then there's another one called Noiret, and that is a red. And I guess the goal of this was to get. Apparently, I didn't know this, and this maybe is why our friend Jackson Blood has had such a negative attitude toward hybrids. Is I guess a lot of American hybrid grapes have this muskiness or gaminess to them that a lot of people don't care for. So when they bred the Noiret in New York at one of the New York colleges, I don't remember which one, and the goal was to get rid of those aromas, the gaminess and the muskiness, but still to produce a nice flavored red. There's also Marquette, which is which was developed in Minnesota, and apparently that's a very new one that was introduced in 2006. The goal of this grape was to develop a more cold hardy grape because it gets cold in Indiana, gets cold in Minnesota for sure. And the way that it was described online was that it's kind of like a cross between a Pinot Noir and a Merlot. That's kind of the taste, and it doesn't have any of that gaminess or muskiness. And it's starting to win a lot of awards and stuff because people didn't realize that you could do this with hybrids. This is an older one. I don't know. Have you had this one before, Pepper? I looked for this to do for the show because I wanted to try a hybrid, and I can't find them anywhere in the Dallas area. It's called Chambourcin. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I have not.
Okay, apparently they grow a lot of that in Indiana. I know
we have our homegrown. We actually have the Marquette wine with homegrown Hoosier grapes from Purdue again. Oh, and it's a very dry wine, and it has it does not have that muskiness. I'm not real fond of it, and I really like really dry wines, but it's not one of my favorites. But no, I haven't heard of the other one. What did you call it again?
I'm pronouncing it wrong. Chambourcin?
Chambourcin. Chambourcin. I mean, like one of the things that we're famous for is not pronouncing anything close to that.
Same here.
Well, this one's actually a really old hybrid. Apparently, it was developed in 1860, and they were using it a lot to fill out other white wines or other red wines. Or actually, I could be getting that wrong. Is it a white or is it? I don't know what type it is, but I guess they were using it to fill out other wines. And then recently, the Germans started picking it up because they were like, oh, it's cold in Germany, and there's this American hybrid that we could use, and it produces a good wine. Let's do it. And so they've started doing it. It's starting to pick up and get some awards and stuff. I just read online that Indiana has some of their acreage under this type. And I wonder if maybe because there are a lot of hybrids and stuff like that people put their own names on them.
It's a red, by the way, Jacob.
It is red? Okay. There's another one called, man, I can't read this one. Mason, you want to try the next one?
Let me try. Marechal
Foch?
Marecchal. And there's an accent mark over the E.
Have you heard of that
I have
one?
not heard of that one
Okay.
either. I have not.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so that's another one that they bred to make it a cold hardy grape, and apparently it's very reminiscent of Beaujolais,
Okay.
which is interesting.
No, I have not heard of that one.
Okay.
And you said that is one that's sold in Indiana?
These are the 4 that they said grow well in Indiana. I don't know how much
Okay.
Indiana is doing them. So it seems though that the Traminette, like when I was just looking for wines from Indiana, which none of them are available here for whatever reason, but it seemed like in Indiana everybody's growing that Traminette. So
Yeah, it's a pretty popular wine here. I know we have 5 distributors in Indiana, and you can't ship it unless you go through these distributors. Like Tui's can't sell wine directly to, say, Target to sell wine. They have to sell it to the distributor, and then the distributor has to sell it to Target, and then Target sells it and gives the distributor money, and Tui's doesn't see that money after they sell it to the distributor. They just get what the distributor gave them for the wine.
Okay, so that makes sense. So then this kind of brings us up to the articles that I had. So there's 2 articles that are going on right now. Right now, I don't know how popular this wine store is in. It's from Fort Wayne, Indiana. How close are you to Fort Wayne? Is that pretty close?
We are 20 minutes away from Fort Wayne. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's a store there called Cap in Cork. So it's CAPN with a little apostrophe Cork, and apparently that's a very big wine distributor or wine retailer in Indiana, and they're allowed to do direct-to-consumer sales and ship the wine to them in the state of Indiana. And one of the things that they want to do is they want to do a similar thing in Michigan and a similar thing in Illinois, but the laws in Michigan and Illinois prevent them from shipping wine direct across state lines. And so they have brought lawsuit against Michigan, and they brought lawsuit against Illinois. In Illinois, it's the Liquor Control Act of 1934, which requires that producers must sell alcohol and have it shipped through a distributor and be sold by an official retailer with a physical location in the state. So in order for Captain Cork to be able to sell direct to consumers in Illinois, they would have to locate at least some retail locations in Illinois. And the Michigan law is similar. This is a lot of like leftover prohibition law, and it sounds like Indiana probably has something similar as well, where if you're in the state, it's not a problem, but when you're out of the state, it's a problem. And so, according to Captain Cork, they're trying to like quote unquote cut out the middleman, and this could result in nearly $227 million in reduction in excise taxes generated by the distributors in Illinois. So obviously the politicians in Illinois have an incentive to prevent this from happening. But the owners of Captain Cork, his name is Lebemoff, he says about 10% of their sales are online, but only in the state of Indiana. They would like to expand their business by selling in Illinois and Michigan, but right now they're prevented, and they would like to expand their online sales. So I don't know about you, Pepper. This is an interesting topic to me because I'm kind of 2 minds on this. I am usually a states' rights guy. And in this case, you know, as ridiculous as the law seems to me in Illinois and Michigan, I don't think that this is really a federal matter. This, to me, seems more...
it's not a federal matter. I think it's definitely a citizens in your state matter. I mean, this brings up an issue a couple of years ago where I believe it was J.C. Penney was putting these cards in people's bags as part of some kind of sale propaganda thing, and it was a wine card. It was a $100 gift certificate for this month, one of those monthly wine companies. And so I was excited. I got home, I called the number, and they said, "You live in Indiana, we can't send this to you."
Oh yeah.
I'm like, why were they freaking handing it out in JCPenney in Fort Wayne, Indiana, if we can't even use it?
Yeah.
And so it's just, yeah. And I don't know what state they were out of, but they said we can't ship wine to Indiana. And so it was a $100 gift certificate that we could not use. I thought about sending it to other people outside of the state and have them order the wine and ship it to Indiana, but then that's probably a federal crime, so I didn't even go through that. But Indiana laws, we just now got Sunday sales. It took forever.
Wow.
And it was a big battle, and it was liquor store lobbyists did not want Sunday sales. They made the excuse that it would force them to open on Sunday and would take business away from them. One of the big supporters of it were wineries, oddly, because that was the only place you could buy, other than restaurants. You can go to a winery and you can buy a bottle of wine in a winery on Sunday, but you could not go to, say, your grocery store or a liquor store to buy a bottle of wine or beer or whatever. And that recently just changed, and it was crazy, but it finally happened, and we can finally buy wine on Sunday in Indiana from, I think, until 8 p.m. And then after that, they cut you off.
Mason, you remember?
Now, do you guys have, real quick, so do you guys have independent liquor stores in Indiana?
Yes, we do. We have independent liquor stores, and they were the big supporters of keeping Sunday sales from happening. And they were the ones that lobbied our politicians, and that finally the people, and it was also this thing with, we had this gas station who kind of skirted around the law so that they could sell cold beer on Sundays, because you're not allowed to do that either. Okay?
Oh, weird.
So you're not allowed to do that still. In fact, when they finally gave us Sunday sales, they specifically worded it so that this gas station would still not be able to do that, because they pissed off the government, because they skirted around. They looked at the wording and they figured out a way to do it, and they did it. And the government put a stop to it. So they gave us our Sunday sales, but they made sure that gas station suffered.
That's funny. That's very funny. So Mason, do you remember? Well, actually, Pepper, in Virginia, where Mason and I used to live, I live in Texas now, but one of the weird liquor laws that was going on there was that the state controls liquor sales. So
yeah,
have you seen that?
I just realized that was a thing a few years ago. I had no idea that the state controlled. And it's the same in Pennsylvania too, isn't it?
Yeah, I forget. Like, I know North Carolina has ABC stores. I'm pretty sure Pennsylvania does as well, because my cousins used to live in Pennsylvania, and they would often make runs to like Total Wine in Delaware, which was an hour and a half away, because there was like some weird sale laws too, and Delaware just like completely open on a lot of stuff. It was like, yeah, whatever, come to us, Pennsylvania.
So that's just crazy to me. How exactly does that work, that the government runs your liquor businesses?
Mason, you probably know more about it than I do. I don't drink liquor almost at all.
Yeah, so basically there's a threshold of alcohol content, and it varies. Like, so in Virginia, like beer can't be over a certain percentage alcohol before it's classified as something weird. And then, there's a the brewery called Dogfish Head. We did my favorite beer from them, which is called 120 Minute, a couple weeks ago on the show. But one of the things is it got banned in Virginia for several years because its alcohol range went from 17% to 25 just because of the way they brewed it. And, they didn't really try to control it, but Virginia's like, no, it's got to be capped at 22. And being a Delaware brewery, the big market is Virginia compared to Delaware. So they refined the process. But in Virginia, so after Prohibition and as some sort of holdover, they came up with this rule basically that the state would sell liquor, and it's just the state ABC store. And when as a kid, they're in a bunch of different shopping centers and it just says ABC store. And the idea, cause my wife is from California, that you could just go to the grocery store and buy, handles and handles of liquor never crossed my mind as a kid. So, they basically buy and distribute, and, classic thing, people always make fun of the people who work at the liquor store. And now Jacob and I will often make fun of state employees, but every time I've ever been to the liquor store, they've always been super helpful, and very nice, and, seem to know everybody, and kind of, they seemed they probably couldn't run a successful business on their own, but they seem like good employees, which kind of always surprised me. I'm like, what is this? How are these guys so good?
Well, I know that Utah has some crazy law. Well, they have quite a few crazy laws, but one of them is their alcohol content is super low. It has to remain super low. It's crazy. You have to buy you have to drink 4 beers to get the effect of one normal beer or something crazy like that.
It's different now. I think if you produce outside of the state, there's a limit. But like in the state, like some of the beers like they produce have like a different like they do have some higher production alcohol content ones. I forget how they're doing it, but it's like the laws changed slightly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
At least we don't have state wine in Indiana.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, and I think that Virginia is lucky that they don't have. Although there's a lot of taxes in Virginia for wine because as soon as you go over, I think 11% alcohol by volume, your taxes go up from like 5% to like 40% or something crazy. So yeah, it's like a huge jump, which is why it incentivizes a lot of breweries to keep their alcohol relatively low. Because if you go over that, then if you're a beer and you go over that percentage, I don't remember what it is. It might be 10%. If you're a beer and you go over that amount, you're now classified as a barley wine, and a barley wine is taxed at a much, much higher rate. I took a tour of a cidery when I was in Richmond. For a visit, and she was saying that they had to she does cider in a very different style. The lady who runs the cidery, they basically make champagne, but instead of using grape juice, they use apple juice and ferment it in the same style as you would ferment a champagne, and they do it with the bottles and the riddling and all that sort of stuff. But the big issue that she had was when she went to market. And I guess she didn't realize this, or she didn't have the correct help, or something like that. When they went to market, they were selling these apple ciders at 14% alcohol, which is very, very high for a cider. And the state went, "Whoop, that's not a cider. That's an apple wine. You owe us, 30% more money." And that really killed her first year of business. She said, fortunately, her investors were able to cover it so she could continue, but they had to totally change their process and make it so that it would come in at under 10% so that they could still market it as a cider. And she was a huge, like a big deal to me. Well, at least to me, it was a big deal because she was going out into the woods in Virginia and looking for apples that they thought were extinct, because during Prohibition, the feds came down into Virginia and chopped down all the trees and got rid of all of these different apple varieties that used to exist there. And so she's been tramping around the Appalachians there looking for wild apple trees and picking them, then bringing them back to her orchards and getting them DNA tested to see what they are.
Right.
So she's like a trooper. She's a hero. Actually, that would be a good person to have on too. But kind of to sort of bring this back around. Earlier, Pepper, you said that you were drinking tonight, but you were not drinking a wine. You're drinking something else in celebration of what today is St. Patrick's Day. So what are you sipping? What are you sipping on tonight?
Jameson, definitely.
The Jameson?
Irish whiskey.
Oh, that's good. So I got Victoria. Victoria, my wife, she likes Irish cream. That's like her drink of choice. And we got a new one that she likes a lot. I think she still likes Bailey's Almande the best, but I try to introduce other things to her. But that was on sale for St. Patrick's Day. But what I got tonight is I chose, because you said, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation again. You said your favorites are Aglianico?
Aglianico.
Aglianico. Yeah. So I got an Aglianico from Italy. Man, I wrote down Aglianico Italian, and I didn't even write down the name of it, but I think I have it pulled up. I think I still have it pulled up. I do. It's man, why do I pick European wines? Because I can't pronounce this. It's Donnacaria Aglianico Irpinaya 2015. It's $20 a bottle at Total Wine here in Texas, but because I had a 20% off coupon or whatever, it ended up being only $18, which is or actually no, it ended up being $16, which is not a bad deal. I looked for an Indiana one, and they have no Indiana wines here, and I think that might be because of what we've been talking about. The shipping laws makes it very difficult. But then again, Texas doesn't have a lot of export laws, and Texas wine is impossible to find anywhere else, it seems like. So it may just be that, like, when the wine industries grow to a certain level, they then you can get out to other places. Like right now, even Virginia is not available very widely. Like here in Texas, we don't get a lot of Virginias, but Virginia wine is, I think, the third largest producer or fourth largest producer maybe in the country is Virginia. And you can get Oregon Pinot Noir pretty much anywhere, and you can get some stuff from Washington. You can get anything you want from California, but Virginia is fourth largest or fifth largest maybe after New York. And you just can't get it anywhere either. So I wonder if that is because of these laws or what the deal with that is.
I'm going to assume it is. I swear we don't get anything other than Indiana wine, California wine, and obviously France, things from Europe. I don't think I've ever seen any wine in Indiana from Virginia on shelves or any state. Texas, definitely I haven't. Definitely just California. So, that's interesting. That's something I'm going to look up and find out what's going on with that. I think
we're going to start looking into that a little bit more too, because this is starting to become something that Mason, you and I bring up a lot on the show. Is I do so many mini episodes on Texas wine because I just like to go out and look and see what's around my area. There's nothing in Dallas, but a couple of hours away, either down by Austin or about 5 hours away near Lubbock, there's a lot of wine going on. And there's up by Sherman, which is an hour away, there's some stuff going on. That's a really new region. I'm not sure what they're doing up there. But kind of going back to you, Pepper, another thing that I learned about you is that you are a Catholic. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
This seems to be...
Yeah, we get to drink during church.
Yeah, exactly. But this is something that I found very interesting, is that a lot of prominent libertarians in the movement are Catholics. Tom Woods, Jeffrey Tucker, in our sort of C-level libertarian populist movement or whatever. Bert Arkus, he's a Catholic. Wednesday the Libertarian Lemur, he's a Catholic. So this seems like a really popular thing. And for two non-Catholics, I'm a Quaker. Mason, you're agnostic, I guess?
No, I'm an atheist.
Atheist,
but,
okay.
That's the thing is like I as a quick aside, don't have any problems with the how to treat other human things Jesus said,
right,
and very much appreciate those teachings, but don't put a religious faith into them.
Okay. Well, what I thought was interesting about this is I've noticed that there's a growing number of Catholics in the libertarian movement. Has your Catholic faith, has that influenced you in becoming a libertarian, do you think? Or is it just coincidental that there's a lot of Catholics that go that way? Or I find it very interesting. That's
actually something I've thought about. I actually was not raised Catholic. I was raised small town, rural Baptist. My uncles are preachers. They go, in fact, I have an uncle or a cousin in Ireland trying to save Catholics.
Okay.
But I converted to Catholicism about, my son is almost 15, about 16 years ago. When I met my husband, I was pretty anti-Catholic when obviously I was raised very Baptist.
Okay.
So I found my faith in Catholicism. It shocked the hell out of me. But I married my husband. About 5 years after we got married, I converted to Catholicism. My kids were baptized Catholic. I don't, and that's an interesting point because Tom Wood did recently become full-fledged libertarian. He's always been, libertarian ideology.
Yeah.
And now he's a card-carrying member.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Tucker. I don't know that my Catholicism has definitely... My personal Catholic faith is more of a mind your own business, pray for people, lead a life that my God would be proud of, and kind of just mirror that for people instead of preaching at people.
Yeah. I
think also the history of the Catholic Church, you see what that authoritarianism can do. I mean, the Catholic Church hasn't been, an angel in history.
Well, that's sort of one thing that Tom Woods has introduced me to. Like, my opinion on the Catholic Church has changed a huge amount since I read his book, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. And I had no idea how, for lack of a better way of putting it, fractured the churches. So there's
definitely.
There's all these different things going on because, I was also raised Baptist, but ended up becoming a Quaker in my early 20s, and very much I think my political beliefs influenced my religious beliefs. Like I was looking for kind of a church that was not evangelical and not what I perceived as authoritarian or as participating in the state. And one of the things that I've observed, because I also almost converted to Catholicism, Byzantine Catholic. One of the things I kind of observed about that is that it's not necessarily anti-state, but it does preach a higher authority than the state, which I think is very threatening to any statist kind of view of the state. Whereas, like when I was a Baptist, there was an American flag on the pulpit, and every day, and like every Sunday, you say the Pledge of Allegiance in service, which is bizarre. And
respect your president. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very, very strange. And now from the outside of it, it's like looking at it, it's like, this is really this does integrate very well with the state. Whereas my experience in the Byzantine Catholic Church and it's not really, I guess it's not, I don't know what the Quakers, what it would be called, but it's not a church. We call it meeting, and we believe that all believers in Christ are the church. So, but at our meeting, because Quaker meetings are silent, there is no liturgy or anything like that, and there's no pastors. It's just quiet. So there is no state worship or any message like that. And then also in the Catholic Mass, when I would go to Byzantine Catholic Mass, there was no reference at all to the government. And it was all about, it was all, God bless. At the time, it was John Paul. So God bless John Paul, and bless him with, his holy knowledge and all that sort of stuff. And it supersedes the government. So it's almost like a counter force to that authority. So that's one of the things that I thought, like maybe that's something that's going on, because I've noticed that all of the liberty, especially now that I'm here in Dallas and I'm starting to work on getting a nice liberty community going together with Carr from the Friends Against Government podcast, is there's a ton of Catholics, and it just never occurred to me that would be so compatible with liberty until I started reading a lot of the Tom Woods stuff and listening to his bonus episodes about Catholicism. It's super interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing that I've noticed, when we go to church, there's no mention of government. It's more of a, we have a prayer, the prayers of the faithful towards the end of the Mass, and it's basically, pray for our Pope, and then we pray for different members of our community and our church community that are going through issues or have had a loss in the family, different things like that, who have asked to be prayed for. It's not necessarily, I can't remember ever hearing government or president or laws and things like that followed being preached at church. Other than, Baptist, in my Baptist church, that was a big central thing, is obey your laws, obey your president, obey your government, obey the police, don't question authority. Whereas in Catholicism, I've been told to question authority.
Yeah. I've
been told to think for myself. I've been told to figure things out on my own. And that's what I've done. And it led me to Catholicism.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. I think that's something that Tom Woods in particular and Jeffrey Tucker also have really gotten me interested in, is this other side of Catholicism I think that what it is it's the Protestant propaganda that's very pervasive in American culture against Catholicism. Makes it so that you just kind of think of it as, the Inquisition and the Crusades and all of these types of things, where like when you go in and read Tom Woods' book, you're like, oh, these guys are the people who invented economics, or like invented the study of economics. And these are the people who first started thinking about the principles of self-ownership and logical deduction for what's right and what's wrong, rather than just like edict from on high. And
we have a saint who wrote about decriminalizing prostitution.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that we can be morally opposed to it, and we should be morally opposed to it, but these women should not be treated like criminals.
Yeah.
Or men, or whoever's doing it. And so that's something that I recently learned about, that I think it was Thomas Aquinas, I'm going to say.
Oh, that would make total sense, because Thomas Aquinas also was the he was the one he was like, I can make a Aristotelian argument for the existence of God without making any sort of appeal to religion. Right. And he goes through it in his treatises on like the original mover and that sort of stuff, where he's like, to dumb it down a whole bunch, he's like, well, if you see a ball rolling downhill, well, something had to make that ball roll down the hill at some point. And if you go back, you can say like, oh, well, it was pushed by this stick, but something must have pushed the stick, and so on and so forth. And so he says like, so logically we have to deduce that there is something out there that is infinitely, it's infinite potential, and that infinite potential is what we could identify as God from our perspective, but from a non-religious perspective, we'll just go back and identify it this way. And this is a guy in like the 1500s or 1400s who's making these arguments, which is super, like, we don't think about like how geniuses existed back then as much, but this was a true genius who was thinking about these things back then. And then the scholastics in Spain were coming up with the concepts of self-ownership and homesteading and marginal utility and like these types of things. They're writing about it in the 1400s. It's crazy. And
if you look at the like the way the state teaches about this, it's like, oh, these ancient, Romans and Greeks, they had all this, learning, and then nothing until the Renaissance. And then, or like maybe a brief aside about Thomas Aquinas, and it's like, and he was kind of addictive, his fault, like the younger people. And you're like, and you hear about, like all of these other treaties and things that he did. And it's like, I understand not, the separation of church and state, maybe not necessarily teaching his religious arguments, but it's like he did a lot more than just the religious arguments and like his writing. Like, yes, there is a heavy religious emphasis on it. He was a monk, but there's way more to it. And then it's like, as Jacob was saying, the scholastics, and even during those times, like the advances in political thought and treatise and stuff like that were coming out of the Muslim groups. Like neither are talked about. And I bet it seems like in the state-run schools, it'd be like, now I bet they probably teach much more about what, is happening with Muslim scholars, because it's like, oh, that's a favored group.
Well, I'm sure that they choose a specific type. And, Mason, you and I have talked about this before too, is I've noticed this a little bit with Quakers in American history. Is they're kind like, I remember in school, like the only thing that was really taught to us about Quakers was, oh, these are those people who think the Bible is equal to other books, and let's go ahead and move on from that. Whereas there's a lot of other stuff going on with the Quakers. They were put in internment camps in World War I for refusing the draft, and they were tarred and feathered by the Puritans because they were offering a different type of education where, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like pyramid education. So it's like the teacher, like the oldest students would come in early in the morning, and the teacher would teach them. And then for their education to be free, they would teach then the next group, and then that group would teach the next group, and then that group would teach the next group. And they were offering this because they were like, look, all Christians need to be able to read the Bible. And the Puritans were like, no, how are they going to be indoctrinated? And, and like, that's not taught. There's a, like there's a Quaker woman, and she invented she was the first woman in America to have a patent, and which, I'm kind of opposed to patents, but, she had a patent on like a way to like weave, like hay into making like hats and stuff like that. So, like, she had a machine that did it. She built this machine, but that's never talked about. And the reason, though, I think that it's not talked about is because the Quakers have been consistently anti-war all the way through. And so anytime you talk about any of them, if you look into them a little bit, they're anti-war, anti-slavery. And that's something that they don't really want to teach, because they've got a lot of good points on why you should be anti-war. It's a very Ron Paul type position where they're just like, yeah, well, A, it doesn't work, and B, it's morally wrong.
Yeah, and I think like they also have like the heavy push of like not necessarily being against the government, like, tear it down, burn it down, and revolt. It's just, that's nice that you think that. I don't agree, and I'm going to go over here. Right. It's kind of like what I remember from school is kind of this heavy emphasis that like the Mormons were crazy criminals and the Quakers were too, or like sort of. And you're like, you look back and you're like, because they wouldn't murder people.
Yeah, well, that's basically what it was.
Wouldn't bend the knee to any earthly authority.
Well, there's been a lot of Quaker tax protesters going back to the 1700s in the United States, where they just are like, yeah, we're just not paying these. And the government comes down and they're like, well, why won't you pay it? And they're like, well, because you use the money to kill people and we're opposed to that. And so we just won't pay it. And they're like, okay, to jail with you. And then while they're in jail, they're like, have you heard the good word of Jesus Christ? So,
Have you heard the good word? And don't pay your taxes when you leave.
Right.
Well, I think there's some guy that's doing, and this is the abortion argument. I obviously don't want to start an abortion argument, but he is opposed to abortion, and so he is not paying his taxes. And he said he's not going to pay his taxes.
I saw that, yeah.
And he so far is winning his court cases. So I think that's I'm interested to see what comes out of that.
I'm very interested in that one as well, because I think it extrapolates to a lot of things. Mason, you've got a set of moral ethics, even though you're not religious, but for religious people who are anti-war, we should be able to use the same logic that this guy uses to not pay taxes.
It violates my faith to kill people. Period. And so, this idea that we can, death penalty, that's funded by taxpayers. War, obviously, all kinds of things.
And that's where I guess I should come off the record as being an atheist and join a faith that has nonviolence as a key tenet, so I can get out of paying my taxes. Because, apparently being morally opposed to murdering anyone for non-religious reasons doesn't qualify you to believing in human rights of being allowed to live is not acceptable unless some divine being told you that, and you believe it.
Yeah. Well, but I think ultimately we can agree that the principles of liberty, whether it comes from the small L or the big L, is that people should be able to, live their lives the way that they want. They should be able to buy wine across the borders and, but at the same time, we don't need the federal government to come in and knock heads to make it happen. We can get the people in the states to agree to just ship it across, and the people who are preventing it are thugs, and that is it. So I think that that's actually probably a pretty good place to end, because I am running short on time, and Pepper, I also feel like we're taking up a tremendous amount of your time. Do you want to share with us anything else that's going on in Indiana as far as the wine industry goes, or as far as the Libertarian Party goes, or just anything else that you're interested in plugging?
I would just say we do have our state convention coming up here in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
I think it's in May, or it might actually be in April. I'm not sure. I'm not going this year, so but that's coming up, and if you come to Indiana, definitely visit our wineries. They're popping up everywhere. Oliver down in Bloomington, obviously 2E's up here. We've got a few up by Fort Wayne. It's just, do our wine tour. It's great. If you come to Indiana.
Well, that sounds great. And 2E's, I'll go ahead and link to 2E's in the show notes page. And hopefully if anybody's in the Indiana area or if they're passing through, they'll stop by at 2E's and have a couple of glasses of their unique wines. When I was looking through the list, a lot of that stuff is not available anywhere I know of. So I really recommend people just go try it out. Even if you don't like it, it's an experience and it's interesting. And they also have a really great website, and it looks like it's a great property too. It just looks really relaxing and just a cool place to hang out.
Yeah, I took a quick peek at it. It looked like a very fun place, and I'm very interested in this Concord grape wine.
Yeah.
Very sweet. If you like sweet wine, you'll like it.
Okay.
Well,
I'll
still try it.
I think, Mason, you're much more open to sweet wine than I am. But I think that I would be willing to try that because I like the Concord grape flavor. It's just not what I expect from wine.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, let's go ahead and do our plugs real quick. Mason, you want to go ahead and do those?
Yeah, so you can always follow us at Tasting Anarchy on Twitter. See the rows and the attacks on Elizabeth Warren that Jacob may be producing. If you want to reach out to us, tastinganarchy@gmail.com. We do have tastinganarchy.com. We are working on having more continuous information posted there and making sure the shows come up. You can not follow us. You can listen to our Friends in Liberty on Friends Against Government podcast. Carr Campbell, who is most recently our guest outside of Pepper on the show. One day we'll get Bird on as well. Jacob's been on the show. Maybe I'll get to be on their show one day. And then Sounds Like Liberty. Jacob and I both have made appearances on them. They're always fun if you're interested in music. Friends Against Government. Just a round table of nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really covers it. Also, Pepper, you didn't put your Twitter. It's at Wine and Liberty on Twitter. Most of the time I see you are retweeting a lot of really great Liberty content and making comments on different things. So I think that if our listeners are interested, they should go ahead and follow you as well. And then one more thing, Mason, because I don't know if I'm putting the commercial in at the beginning of this episode or not, but we have a new semi-sponsor, and that's Last Bottle Wines. Last Bottle Wines has a new wine every day, and it's available until it's sold out. New day, new bottle, and it's a great deal. They're only high-quality wines. If you sign up with our link, you get 10% off, and that is lastbottlewine.com/invite/tasting anarchy. And you'll get that $10 off your first purchase. So that is it from me, Mason. Anything else?
That's it.
Pepper, anything from you?
Nope, that'll be it. Thank you.
Actually, outside of thanking Pepper for joining us.
Of course.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Of course.
All right, everybody. Stay free.
Down door, drinking half gallons and calling for more. Drinking wine, for you to drink wine. Wine, for you to drink wine. Wine, for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Drink it, man. Oh, give me some of that slop. Oh, pass that bottle to me. If you want to get along in Peterstown, buy some wine and pass it around. Age runs up to 49. All them cats, they love sweet wine. Drinking wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Wine, wine, wine. Elderberry. Wine, wine, wine. Cherry, cherry. Wine, wine, wine. Blackberry. Wine, wine, wine. Port and sherry. Wine, wine, wine. Oh, pass that bottle to me. Now down on Gillsby at Willie's Den, he wasn't selling but American gin. One soldier wanted a bottle of wine. He hipped that cat for $1 and a dime. I'm drinking wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Now I got a nickel, have you got a dime? Let's get together and get some wine. Somebody's fifth and somebody's fourth. When you get together, you're doing things smart. Drinking wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Pass that